Hello, sleeper. Tonight you lie in your familiar room, with its soft shadows on the walls and the faint hum of distant traffic outside the window. The glow of your screen still clings to your eyes, small after-images of messages and worries that have been tapping on your mind all day. You feel the weight of everything you did and everything you still have not done sitting in your shoulders and behind your ribs. Part of you wants to scroll a little more. Another part is simply too tired to keep caring. Under the blankets, your breathing begins to lengthen. A quieter self, the one that remembers childhood imaginations and half-forgotten daydreams, starts to wake up. It turns away from deadlines and notifications and reaches for something older than any schedule, something that feels like warmth, wood smoke, and snow. And somewhere at the edge of your thoughts, you sense the glow of a distant fire waiting for you in the dark. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your location and let me know how your day has really been. Your worries, your exhaustion, or even a tiny joy that made you smile. I'm here to truly listen and offer the most sincere, heartfelt advice I can. Now, turn off the lights, take a deep, slow breath, let your tiredness melt away, and gently close your eyes. Let's drift together into tonight's dreamlike lands. And tomorrow morning, if you still remember, send me a message and tell me what you dreamed. Darkness folds around your room like a soft curtain. The last thin halo of blue light behind your eyelids compresses into a single orange pulse, steady and alive. Curtains, ceiling, the slope of clothes on a chair all melt away. In their place, you see a low fire cupped in a ring of stones, embers breathing in and out as though the ground itself inhales through them. Heat brushes your cheeks and the bridge of your nose, not harsh, just the kind of warmth you crave on a miserable wet evening when you finally step inside. If you somehow dropped into the middle of the ice age in your current sleepwear, you probably would not last very long. But here you travel in the safest way possible, fully under blankets, fully by imagination, with your modern heartbeat thudding calmly in a very ancient night. The smell in the air shifts next. The faint trace of detergent and city dust drains away, replaced by older scents, burning spruce and birch, a hint of charred bone, the rich tang of fat spitting into the flames. The hum of appliances fades into nothing until your ears settle around a new set of sounds. You hear the dry crackle of wood as it splits in the heat, the occasional pop of sap bursting free, and beyond the reach of the fire, the low, restless whisper of wind sliding across open ground. The usual soundtrack of your century falls silent, as if someone has gently turned down the volume on everything except this small circle of light and breath. You notice that you are no longer lying down. You are sitting upright, knees drawn close, wrapped in dense layers of fur and hide, with a faint smell of smoke. Under your fingers, you feel the rough grain of tanned skin. The earth beneath you is frozen solid, but a folded hide softens the contact enough to keep the cold from biting too deeply. Chill air nips at your ankles and the tip of your nose, yet your chest, back, and hands rest in a pocket of steady warmth fed by the fire's slow exhale. When you tilt your head back, the sky above is a great black bowl scattered with more stars than you have ever seen. Without city glow, every point of light is sharp, and although you do not know their names, some deep part of you recognizes them the way your body remembers how to breathe. At the edge of the firelight, other shapes sit close to the flames, wrapped in thick cloaks, faces turned toward the heat. Hands move in a slow rhythm of adjusting and settling, and you become simply another tired creature, making room beside the fire, another breath in the small circle of life. Beyond that circle, the frozen plain stretches into the dark, low shrubs huddling under crusts of snow as the land rises and falls in broad, quiet waves. Farther out, darker mounds break the horizon, too massive to be rocks. You feel them before you see them, the slow, weighty movement of bodies across the white. The ground beneath you carries a faint, steady tremor, like a distant drum you sense more in your bones than in your ears, and you understand that you have drifted a long way from your bedroom, and yet closer to something essential you did not know you were missing. The fire in front of you beats in a slow, steady rhythm. Embers rise and fall like small hearts breathing in the dark. Your thoughts copy that pattern, drifting instead of racing, stretching instead of snapping from one worry to another. The wrapped figures beside you are quiet and still, shapes made of fur, shadow, and patient breath. There are no alarms here, no screens, no unread badges glowing in the corner of your vision. The only task is to keep the flames alive and share the warmth. As your fingers search out of habit for a phone that is not there, they find only smoked hide and soft hair, and the habit slowly lets go. A deeper kind of awareness takes its place, open and unhurried. Beyond the ring of stones, the light thins and the land begins. Snow starts where the fire ends, a pale sheet scattered with points of ice that catch the starlight. This is not city snow that turns to gray slush within hours. It lies deep, pressed down by years of winter, a quiet weight wrapped over the earth. The air is so clear that the dark holds detail. Low swells and dips show where the ground rolls beneath the white. Small bushes crouch under smooth mounds, their branches trapped in frozen arcs. Wind has combed patterns into the surface, long ridges and ripples that look almost like waves caught in mid-motion. The cold is no longer just a number on a forecast. It is the slow, patient force that has shaped everything you see. You draw in a long breath, and it feels like taking the night into your lungs. The air is thin and very dry, sharp as it passes your throat, yet somehow clean enough to feel kind. Muscles in your chest protest for a moment, unused to this much clarity. Then they accept it. Each exhale leaves you in a faint cloud that hangs above the snow, turns silver for a heartbeat, then vanishes into the dark. For those brief seconds, you can see your life as a small, warm fog meeting a vast, frozen world and being gently absorbed. You stand. The hides across your shoulders settle with you, heavy but reassuring, like hands resting there to steady you. Your boots press into the crusted snow with a muted crunch. Beneath that thin crust, you sense depth. Layers of ice and packed powder running down into the soil. Winters have been stored there, one upon another, each storm pressed into silence and turned into memory. Every step places you over years you never lived, over storms you never felt, all stacked below your feet. Above you, the sky opens wider with every pace. Stars crowd thickly together, bright and sharp, more numerous than you knew were possible. A few familiar patterns appear, the ones you have seen on apps or classroom posters, but now they are no longer tidy drawings. They are chains of fire hung in a real, endless ceiling. They do not flinch when you look at them. They do not ask how productive you were today. They burn for people who crossed this ice long before your name existed, and they will burn for others long after your troubles are finished. Their calm, distant light puts your day on a different scale. It becomes just one small span of time inside something much larger and much older. You walk away from the camp until the fire shrinks behind you. First, it is a small orange bowl of light, then only a single seed glowing on the horizon. The cold folds around you more completely, firm and steady. The wind travels over the plain in slow streams, brushing your hood and cheeks like an invisible river. Sometimes it catches loose snow and lifts it into low curtains that drift around your legs, glitter quickly, then fall still again. Somewhere far off, ice cracks with a dull snap, or frozen ground settles with a low sigh. There are no horns, no engines, no humming machines. The quiet is wide and simple, and your body begins to match it without you trying. A practical voice in you notes that if this were real, you would not last long out here alone. Heat would leak from your body, exhaustion would come, and this land would remain exactly the same. Oddly, that thought is gentle rather than cruel. Because your actual body is safe beneath your blankets, you are free to borrow this view without paying the price your ancestors paid. You can wander this ice age night with no fear, taking only understanding and leaving no tracks. You pause and look back once more at the faint glow of the camp, then turn toward the long white distance ahead. With each careful step and each clear breath, you cross a quiet threshold, moving deeper into a time and a world that are not yours and yet feel strangely ready to hold you for a while. The white distance ahead looks, at first glance, like pure emptiness, a pale strip where sky and ground blur together. Then your eyes soften and the blankness begins to sort itself into folds and lines. The snow lies in low waves, not flat at all, with darker seams where old meltwater once carved and froze. Sparse clumps of grass and sedge poke through, drained of color but still gripping the soil. From far away, it seemed like a world owned only by wind and cold. Up close, it feels more like a stage that has been waiting a very long time for heavy footsteps. You sense those footsteps before you see anything. A slow, rounded thudding rises through the soles of your boots, too low for your ears to catch easily, more vibration than sound. You stop walking and let your breathing settle so your body can listen properly. Cold presses against your cheeks and nose. Your exhale drifts away in a small gray plume. Beneath that quiet, the ground trembles in patient, repeating pulses. Whatever is coming is massive, numerous, and so at home here that the ice seems to carry it as easily as a road carries cars in your own century. Your gaze slides along the horizon until it hooks on a darker band lying along the pale edge of the world. At first it could be a low ridge, but it moves very slowly sideways along the sky. As you watch, the band breaks into separate humps that rise and fall like a distant, uneven wave. The air reaching you now carries a new scent: torn snow, crushed dry grass, and underneath a deep, warm musk that belongs entirely to living bodies. The vibration under your feet grows clearer with each breath, a loose, rolling drumbeat, and the empty plain suddenly feels crowded. The humps resolve into bodies. Backs arch and dip in great curves higher than any cow or horse you have ever seen. Huge heads sway on thick necks, and from each head a pair of long ivory tusks sweeps outward, pale crescents that catch the faint light. Trunks hang down and swing with each step, brushing snow aside in lazy arcs. From mouths and trunks, breath pours in dense plumes, flashing briefly silver before the wind tears them apart. You are watching a herd of mammoths, not as museum models or neat illustrations, but as a moving river of fur and bone and warm breath crossing the Ice Age night. Your mind grabs for comparisons and fumbles. It tries to measure them in buses, trucks, and heavy machinery, and none of it fits. Machines are all sharp edges, bolts, and noise. These are rounded, layered lives, built of dense bone and deep fat wrapped in shaggy hair that ripples when the wind feels playful. Frost sparkles along their shoulders and flanks. Some carry a thin crust of snow on their backs, as if the sky tried to tuck them in, and they did not bother to shake it off. Their ears are small and pressed close to trap heat. Their eyes, tiny on that vast canvas, shine with a steady, practical attentiveness, as if the landscape has grown itself a set of moving lookout towers. They move without hurry, following a route that exists in muscles and memories rather than on any drawn map. Calves travel near the center, their short legs working in quick, earnest steps to keep up. When one stumbles over a ridge of hard snow, your own stomach flutters with it, and the adults around it adjust without ceremony. Steps shorten, trunks hover, shoulders angle, so the youngster stays wrapped in a shifting wall of protection. No schedules, no reminders, no performance reviews, only the long habit of surviving winter together. Watching them, you feel your own life shrink to its honest size. Your worries are still there, but beside this slow, ancient procession, they feel like small weather inside one fragile chest. While the mammoths keep walking, step after patient step, steady enough to lull even a restless modern heart. You stand very still, letting their rhythm soak into your bones until it feels as if your own pulse has joined the herd and is quietly crossing the ice with them. You stand there a little too long, letting the mammoth herd pull your attention farther and farther out across the plain, until the cold begins to nibble through the layers of hide and fur at your shoulders. Your toes offer a small, reasonable complaint from inside your boots. For all the majesty of this ancient world, your circulation still lives in the 21st century, and it is gently reminding you that admiring megafauna does not actually keep you warm. So you turn away from the slow procession of walking hills and let your eyes drift back toward the tiny ember that is your borrowed home, the fire on the horizon. The walk back feels different from the walk out. On the way toward the mammoths, the white distance seemed infinite and impersonal, like a blank page daring you to write something brave on it. Now, each step carries you toward the promise of heat and shared breath. The wind that once felt like a pure, clean force now presses a little more insistently at your knees and cheeks. Your body has tasted warmth and community. It wants back inside that invisible circle where fingers thaw and faces glow. Snow crunches under your boots, the sound slightly softer now, as your ears attune again to smaller details. In front of you, the orange point of fire swells slowly into a flickering pool. As you approach, the outlines of the people around the flames sharpen from vague humps into distinct shapes. There are not many of them, just enough to form a quiet ring around the heat, each wrapped in layers of hide, fur, and woven fibers that blur their individual frames into rounded, bundled silhouettes. Despite the cold, there is no frantic shivering, no wasted movement. Every gesture seems deliberate. A hand turning a piece of meat on a flat stone, shoulders adjusting slightly to make room, a body leaning forward to feed a slender stick to the hungry coals at the center. You hesitate at the outer rim of the light, suddenly aware of your absolute strangeness here, as if all your modern awkwardness has followed you back through time and is now standing beside you in a parka made of social anxiety. Yet the camp has its own gravity, and it does not ask for explanations. The circle widens by a breath. Someone shifts a rolled hide just far enough that a bare patch of ground appears between two seated forms. No one waves you over, no one performs a big official welcome. In this climate, hospitality is not an event, it is a reflex. Space, warmth, and food are the currency, and there is an unspoken rule that no breathing body stays outside their reach longer than necessary. You step into the gap and lower yourself onto the folded skin. The earth is still hard and chilled beneath it, but the buffer is enough, and the fire begins to work on your cold, tightened muscles. The flames are low now, mostly glowing coals and modest tongues of light licking at the blackened ends of logs. Above them hangs a simple frame of green wood, and over that pieces of meat and strips of fat dangle on cords made from twisted fibers. They glisten in the heat, occasionally sending a thin thread of grease down into the embers where it bursts in a brief flare and a puff of rich smell. A flat stone rests near the edge of the fire, warming slowly, with a heavier chunk of meat laid across it. The outer layer is already darkening and crisping, while steam curls lazily from the center. Not far away, a narrow bone is propped up right at a slant, its split top catching drops of melted fat and guiding them into a hollow at its base, a tiny reservoir of warmth and calories. Hands move in small, efficient patterns, tearing fibers, adjusting cords so nothing burns too quickly, rotating a log so its hidden side catches more heat, lifting a near-finished strip of meat to cool briefly in the air before it stiffens into something portable and durable. This is the etiquette of surviving the long cold, an arrangement of motions so practiced they look like instinct. No one hoards the best spot by the fire. Bodies trade places naturally, those who have warmed enough leaning back so numb fingers can move closer. When a new piece of wood is needed, someone stands, walks to the small pile of frozen logs and bone nearby, and brings back fuel without making a show of helpfulness. Eventually, one of the cooked pieces is nudged toward you, along with a slender shard of smoothed bone that functions as the local version of cutlery. You are expected to eat, not because you are special, not because you have done anything to earn it, but because your warm breath is inside the circle, and that is reason enough. The meat is dense and smoky, fibers pulling apart with a little effort. It carries flavors that your modern diet rarely delivers. Clean fat, faintly sweet from the grasses stored in the animal's own body, and a subtle tang from the smoke of whatever wood this tundra could spare. You chew slowly, feeling not just taste, but also the story of labor it contains, tracking, waiting, risk, exhaustion, and the collective relief of turning danger into sustenance. Heat from the fire soaks steadily into your cheeks and chest. Behind you, the cold presses in, but it is now a polite, distant guest, not the host. Above, the sky continues its silent performance, stars wheeling unnoticed because all the drama is happening at ground level. You notice the tools lying within easy reach, a stone blade with a smooth, reassuringly solid heft, a scraper shaped perfectly to fit fingers hardened by years of work, a bundle of sinew coiled ready for repairs. Near the edge of the camp, a small stack of bones waits to be cracked for marrow, each one a future burst of energy for someone's tired body. Everything around you has a purpose. Nothing exists just to fill space or feed boredom. You feel the unspoken rules settle around you, like another layer of hide. Share warmth, waste nothing, keep the fire alive, protect the center where the youngest and weakest rest. The etiquette here is simple but unforgiving. If someone stumbles in from the dark, you make room. If a spark leaps onto fur, you brush it away. If the wind rises, you angle your body so the flames can lean against you. Compared to the messy, often contradictory codes of modern social life, this direct clarity feels like a balm. You do not have to say anything clever or appear particularly impressive. You only have to be present. Breathe in, breathe out, and quietly join the work of keeping this tiny island of life afloat on the frozen sea. Morning arrives without alarms. There is no chiming melody from your phone, no soft buzz from a bedside table. The night simply thins. The black overhead grows softer and then takes on a faint, bruised blue, and the fire at the camp's center shifts from fierce guardian to sleepy heart, a bed of ash cradling deep crimson coals. You wake gradually, not from panic, but from discomfort, a stiff shoulder, a numb hip, a tickle of cold air sneaking under the edge of a hide. When you finally open your eyes, the first thing you see is that low glow, the same one you watched last night, now quieter but still alive. You realize there has been an unbroken chain of care between then and now. Someone has been feeding the embers while you drifted in safety you did not earn. Around you, the camp stirs. No one leaps upright. There is no dramatic scramble. Instead, bodies unroll from sleeping positions with a kind of unhurried efficiency. Hides are folded back, cloaks are pulled tighter, and faces emerge, marked with faint tracks from where they pressed against fur and skin all night. Breath curls up in little clouds above each waking shape. There is a pattern to who moves first. The ones who tend the fire reach for sticks and half-burned logs, coaxing the embers into livelier tongues of flame. Others straighten sleeping places, shake frost from coverings, and check on the youngest and weakest, feeling foreheads with the backs of their hands, making sure nothing quietly went wrong in the dark. You see no to-do list scrawled on a wall, yet everyone seems to know what their body should do next. The sky continues to pale, revealing a thin wash of color along the horizon, the faintest gold folded into layers of gray and blue. The wind tests the camp, slipping between bodies and along the ground, checking for carelessness. In answer, someone drags a piece of frozen wood closer, another angle of bone shields the fire, and boots stamp new paths through the snow where ice grew overnight. A quick, silent inventory is taking place. How much fuel is left? How much meat still hangs over the smoking racks? How many tools need sharpening? How far off the mammoths passed in the night? There are no meetings, but decisions are happening, with each glance at the sky, each measurement of breath hanging in the air, each fingertip pressed into the grain of a drying hide. One cluster of activity gathers around a flat stone spread with nodules of dark, glassy rock. Here, hands that once reached for keyboards or car keys are useless. The hands at work are practiced, moving with the ease of muscle memory. Fingers choose a core, weigh it, tilt it, then strike with another stone at just the right angle. Each blow is decisive but not reckless. Flakes snap off in predictably curved pieces that catch the weak morning light along their razor-thin edges. You watch the transformation, rock becoming tool in a slow conversation between brain, bone, and stone. A thick chunk of nothing special becomes a blade, a scraper, a point that will later shape meat, hide, and maybe the entire fate of a hunt. A sliver that would slice your skin without effort is discarded when it fails some subtle test you cannot see. Here, sharpness is not a metaphor for being clever. It is the difference between eating and only watching others eat. Not far away, the hides that make this camp habitable are receiving their own kind of care. Large sheets of tanned skin are stretched over frames, pegged and lashed so they will not shrink oddly as they dry. Hands move along the surfaces with scrapers and stones, removing the last clingy scraps of flesh and fat. The motions are rhythmic, almost soothing, yet precise enough to avoid thinning the hide too much. A misjudged stroke means a weak patch that could tear in a storm, and winter does not politely reschedule just because someone was tired. Children and younger adolescents take up smaller tasks at the edges, picking loose hair from seams, twisting thin strips into cords, carrying scraped fragments to be burned or boiled. This is their classroom, and the tests are never written, yet the consequences are very real. Closer to the fire, the meat saved from earlier hunts is being coaxed into long-term security. Strips are threaded onto cords and repositioned over the smoke so that no piece hogs the best heat. Fatty portions are sliced away and set aside, some to be melted into the bone reservoir, some to be stored in clever hide skins where cold air will keep it stable. The smell that rises is rich, but not extravagant. It speaks more of caution than of feast, of calories being banked for days when the chase fails or the weather makes movement impossible. In a world this cold, food is not comfort eating, it is future survival hanging in the air. You can almost feel how each mouthful eaten now is weighed against the needs of a later self. As the light strengthens, a small group readies itself for distance. They check the edges on freshly napped blades, adjust bindings on spears, sling coils of cord and strips of hide over their shoulders. Their eyes scan the open land, reading it the way you once skimmed notifications. A trail here, a patch of disturbed snow there, faint lines where herds carved paths days ago. You recognize none of it, but to them this is as clear as a map. They move out in a line, steps deliberate, spreading just enough to cover more ground, but never so far that a shouted warning would be lost, if shouting were part of this soundless choreography. Their job is to see what the herds are doing, whether the mammoth's slow river of fur is turning toward or away, and whether opportunities or dangers lie wrapped in the day's weather. The rest of the camp sinks into a working rhythm. Some gather wood from scrubby growths that somehow survive in this land, cutting away only what will not kill the plant entirely. Others head toward a frozen stream, where they chip through the ice to reach water and haul it back in skin bags that bump gently against their legs. Everyone moves in arcs that return periodically to the fire, as if they were on invisible tethers tied to that glowing center. Light climbs, casts shorter shadows, then begins its slow descent, and with it the pace of activity shifts. Tools are put aside, finished hides rolled, meat checked one last time. The scouts return, bodies outlined against the paling sun, carrying news in the tilt of their shoulders and the way their boots bite into the snow. By the time night begins to knit itself back across the sky, you can sense the pattern of the day as clearly as the constellations overhead. Wake, tend the fire, check the weather, the food, the tools, the herds. Spread out, gather in. Work that feeds the present, work that protects the future, work that honors the past by not wasting what it fought to keep alive. The rhythm has nothing to do with meeting invites or productivity hacks, yet it is the original version of all of them. Your own breathing has started to match it without permission, rising with effort, falling with rest, circling back always to that ring of warmth in a world made mostly of cold. Somewhere out on the darkening plain, the mammoths continue their slow migration, and without quite knowing when it happened, you have become part of the same vast, patient tempo that guides them. The next time you wake, the light has a thin, metallic softness, as if the sky is running on low power. Frost rims the camp in pale fringes. People move with the same practiced calm, but shoulders sit higher, jaws tighter. Eyes drift toward the horizon where the scouts disappeared at dawn. The mammoths you watched as distant shadows have come closer, following their old migration line along the ridges. Smoked meat and stored fat lie in small bundles near the fire, quiet reminders that yesterday's courage, sliced and dried, will not feed everyone for long. The herd is no longer background scenery. It is a necessary question waiting to be answered somewhere out in the white. You go with the tracking party, wrapped again in heavy hides that smell of smoke and animal oil. A spear rests in your hand, its stone point keen and cold, the shaft polished by years of other fingers. It feels less like a weapon than a narrow agreement between your small body and this indifferent landscape. The hunters around you waste nothing. Their steps are short and sure, knees slightly bent, weight rolled carefully so the snow accepts them without loud complaint. They read marks your eyes barely see, a shattered crust where an enormous foot slipped, a frozen pile of dung half buried in drift, a groove where a trunk dragged as the herd moved. When a wide band of cloudy ice appears, the frozen river, they spread out, scrape fresh snow from its surface, and cross at a place tested days ago. Each step pulls a faint groan from the river's locked spine, but nothing gives way, and you keep planting your boots inside their prints, borrowing confidence from lives built on winter calculations. On the far bank, the land rises into long, low hills. Wind has combed the snow into hard ridges and shallow troughs, a frozen sea caught mid-wave. Beneath the clean cold hangs a heavier scent, torn plants, churned earth, and a dense musky breath of living bodies. The vibration under your feet begins as a suggestion, then deepens into a steady pulse that hums in your shins. The hunters slow and sink lower, bending their knees so cloaked backs merge with the curves of the ground. Loose edges are tucked in, not for warmth, but to keep flapping cloth from betraying them. You copy them, awkward at first, then more smoothly as your muscles understand that here, height and noise are both excellent ways to be turned into a footnote in somebody else's story. You creep along the sheltered side of a ridge until your gloved hands reach the crest. Belly close to the crest, you ease your head up and look. The shallow basin beyond is full of mammoths. They stand scattered across the white bowl like slow-moving islands. Some work at patches of exposed grass, trunks sweeping aside ice and pushing food to their mouths. Others rest with legs folded under impossible weight until one rises and the whole vast body tilts and lifts in a single practiced motion. Breath steams from every mouth in heavy plumes that drift and tangle, forming a low cloud above dark backs. Snow compresses under huge feet with a deep, soft crunch. Trunks rasp along the ground. Tusks knock dully against buried ice. Now and then a low rumble rolls through the herd, too deep for your ears yet gentle in your chest, like thunder remembered rather than heard. Whatever is being said in that bass register has nothing to do with you. The mammoths follow routes mapped in old minds long before your worries existed, and will keep walking whether or not you are here to stare. Beside you, the hunters lie almost as still as the drifts. Their attention roams even while their bodies hardly move. They watch the wind with the tilt of a chin, trace invisible paths of scent curling around rocks and rises, count calves and older animals whose slower steps might mean both opportunity and danger. In their thoughts, lines of approach and retreat sketch themselves. Here, a narrow draw that might funnel bodies. There, a slope too steep for a clean escape. They are not daydreaming about glory. They are solving an equation in which every variable is heavy, breathing, and fully capable of crushing them, while failure still waits back at the fire in the shape of hungry children and empty racks. Flattened against the crust, Cloak dusted with frost, your thigh muscles begin to tremble from holding the crouch. That tightness in your chest, the weighing of risk and reward, feels familiar from your own life when money runs thin or responsibilities pile up. Here, the numbers are measured in calories and storms instead of digits on a screen, but the balance is the same. The herd shifts in slow unison. The ground answers with a deeper thrum, and for a few breaths you fall into that rhythm, feeling the weight of every choice trembling softly through the snow beneath your hands. The waiting stretches until your cramped muscles forget when they were last allowed to straighten. The hunters beside you keep still with a patience that makes your own restlessness feel like a badly trained puppy. The mammoths continue their slow meal, turning in place, pushing snow aside, lumbering a few steps and stopping again. It looks almost peaceful, but under the calm is the math everyone here lives by. Bodies this large carry a season's worth of survival wrapped in fur and fat, and there are only so many chances each year to convert moving mountains into stacked, smoking strips above the fire. Eventually, a subtle ripple passes through the hunters. It is not a hand signal or a whispered command. It is more like a thought that arrives in several minds at once. The herd has shifted just enough. A few animals have wandered toward a shallow draw where the ground dips and the snow lies deeper. Among them moves a slower shape, an older mammoth whose steps drag a little, whose head hangs lower between its shoulders. The choice hurts, and you can feel that hurt even in silence. Respect and necessity have to occupy the same body here, and it never gets easy to let one win over the other. You slide back from the ridge with the others, keeping low. The group unfolds into motion like a piece of folded cloth, each person slipping into a role grown from years of repetition. Some angle off wide to become the pressure on the herd's edge, using their small, stubborn presence and carefully placed rocks to nudge the animals toward the deeper snow. Others move toward the draw itself, reading the ground for firmer patches where their feet can grip when it matters most. You go with them, feeling the uncomfortable stretch between your imagination and the reality this scene is built from. Safe in your bed, you are only a ghost here, a passenger. If this were not a dreamlike drift, but an actual Ice Age morning, you would be one of the more fragile variables in this equation. The wind, obedient so far, travels at your back, carrying your faint human smell away from the herd. It skates over the drifts, slips across your shoulders, and rushes on. Each time it brushes your face, you are reminded that this entire plan hangs from a thread of moving air. On some level, you know exactly how that goes. You have watched careful schedules collapse because one email arrived late, or one small change rippled through a project. Out here, the stakes are meat instead of money, but the principle is the same. When the moment comes, it is almost gentle. A few mammoths turn their heads, ears twitching as if catching a distant, odd note beneath the wind. Shadows move at the basin's edge, where the flanking hunters have revealed themselves just enough to be annoying, not enough to be truly threatening. The herd, not fond of surprises, obligingly edges away from the irritation, drifting like a slow tide toward the deeper snow. One by one, the smaller calves are guided by their mothers to firmer ground, while the older, slower animal ends up nearer the soft center. None of this is malicious. It is simply how creatures, including you, tend to behave when subtle pressure is applied in the right places. You and the hunters near you ghost down the side of the basin, boots biting into the crust, breath held without needing to be told. The snow in the draw looks deceptively even, its surface smooth and inviting. Beneath that thin, innocent crust lie pockets of air and layers of softer powder waiting to swallow unwary feet. This is what the hunters are counting on. A brief falter in those massive steps, just long enough to bring spears within reach of ribs and lungs. Everything narrows to the sound of your own pulse, the rasp of your breath in the hood, the muffled thud of giant feet stamping patterns into the white. Then the wind changes its mind. It does not howl or roar, it simply hesitates, swirls, and returns along a slightly different path, looping around a low rise you barely noticed. Your scent, your entire party's scent, rolls like an invisible fog directly into the herd. Heads lift in sudden sharp unison. Trunks rise, tasting the air. For a heartbeat, nothing moves. The entire basin holds its breath, an enormous, fragile stillness balanced on the edge of reaction. The reaction arrives. The old mammoth bellows, not the deep conversational rumble you felt earlier, but a raw, explosive sound that punches the air out of your chest even from a distance. Calves press against their mothers. Adults pivot as one, trying to face the new, poorly understood threat. Snow erupts under their feet as the herd surges sideways, seeking an escape line that was never supposed to exist. The shallow draw, carefully chosen as a place of controlled difficulty, becomes a zone of chaos as heavy bodies churn deeper into it than any hunter planned. You try to move with the others, but the ground betrays you. The crust beneath your boot gives way with a soft, treacherous sigh, and suddenly your leg plunges down through layers of powder. Snow closes around your thigh like cold water. You go down hard on one knee, shoulders twisting, spear skidding away from your hand. For a few dizzy seconds, your world shrinks to the ragged thud of your heart and the thunder of giant feet somewhere too far close. The air is full of powder, thrown up by panicked giants. It glitters briefly, absurdly beautiful, before settling on your hood and lashes. One mammoth, half sliding as it tries to turn on the treacherous surface, lurches closer than any reasonable risk assessment would approve. Its foot punches into the snow with a force that sends a tremor straight through your trapped leg. You feel the vibration more than the sound, a blunt, bone-deep thud that reminds you how thin the barrier is between interesting historical experience and you are a decorative smear on the tundra. Hunters shout without words, using their bodies and movement to pull the animal's attention away, to open even the smallest corridor of safety. They become moving punctuation around the herd's frantic sentence, redirecting momentum wherever they can. The plan, so tidy in their minds an hour ago, now hangs in tatters. Some animals break away from the basin entirely, heading for open ground where spears can never match their speed. Others mill in place, trumpeting, tusks carving wild arcs through the air. Spear shafts flash, points bite and glance, and sometimes find their mark, but nothing follows the clean diagrams your imagination drew from a safe distance. This is what it looks like when reality marks up your best-laid plans with its own messy red ink. You drag your leg free from the hole with a desperate, inelegant heave, snow scraping under your knee, every muscle burning. Hands grab your cloak at the shoulders, hauling you sideways just as another massive foot slams down where you were tangled a heartbeat before. The impact sends a fine spray of ice into the air. The ground shudders so hard your teeth click together. You are on firmer snow again, lungs pulling in sharp, freezing gulps, eyes stinging. There is no space here for clever commentary, only the blunt animal knowledge that you are very small and the world is very heavy. The herd, pushed by fear and a few painfully placed spears, finally finds its path out of the basin and surges away across the plain, a retreating tide of fur and steam and fading vibrations. The hunters stand in their wake, scattered and panting, some with new bruises blooming under layers of hide, some with spears broken or lost. A few dark patches in the snow mark where the day's risky bargain has paid out in meat, but the price is etched into every hunched shoulder and every gaze flicked silently across the group to count who is still upright. You stand among them, chest heaving, snow clinging to your boots and sleeves, and adrenaline still buzzing in your fingertips. The balance between feast and catastrophe has wobbled dangerously, and this time settled on a fragile middle ground. No one here needed the reminder that plans are only suggestions and that survival is never guaranteed. But the Ice Age has given it anyway, with its usual lack of subtlety. As your breathing slows and the thunder of mammoth feet fades into memory, you feel the world widen again around you, cold, vast, indifferent, and the small ring of people beside you who have chosen once more to keep each other alive inside it. The walk back to camp is nothing like the careful, poised approach you made at dawn. Then every footstep felt like a strategic decision. Now the steps are simply necessary, pulled along by gravity and fatigue. Your legs move because stopping in this cold is not an option. The air that once tasted clean and invigorating now rasps a little in your chest, edged with the sour tang of spent adrenaline. Behind you, the basin still holds its churned, chaotic snow and scattered dark patches, already beginning to freeze into memory. Ahead, a thin thread of smoke marks the place where warmth and waiting eyes are gathered, pulling the group forward like a quiet magnet. No one marches in triumphant formation. The line of hunters is ragged, spacing dictated by who is limping, who is carrying extra weight, who is dragging a damaged spear behind them. A few bundled shapes move together under the load of newly won meat, wrapped tightly in hide to keep snow and wind from stealing its worth. The scent of blood and fat rides with you, rich and heavy, broadcasting your success and vulnerability to any nose tuned to catch it. Here, victory does not smell like confetti and champagne. It smells like work still to be done. As the camp swells into view, the ring of firelight widens and softens, greeting you the way a lit apartment window can make a whole city block feel a little kinder on a bad night. Figures rise from their tasks, not in a choreographed welcome, but in a ripple of attention that moves from person to person. Eyes count the returning group with the precision born of fear that never fully goes away. 1, 2, 3, each familiar outline slotted back into its place. Only when the last shape crosses into the circle of light does some invisible muscle in the camp finally unclench. There is no dramatic collapse, no theatrical celebration. Instead, the group dissolves naturally into clusters of focused activity. Meat comes off shoulders and sleds and is laid out carefully on clean snow, where the freezing air can start buying time. Hands move quickly to sort pieces into what must be eaten soon and what can be treated for longer storage. Bones are stacked to one side, rank and file of future tools and fuel. The smell of fresh blood clashes for a moment with the older scent of wood smoke and drying hides, like two different chapters of the same story overlapping. Closer to the fire, the repairs begin. You are steered without fanfare to a folded hide near the warmth, where you can finally take stock of your own body. Bruises announce themselves with a deep, spreading ache along your thigh and shoulder, blooming slowly under layers of skin like dark flowers you did not ask for. Scrapes sting when cold air reaches them, then go oddly numb. A pair of practiced hands presses along your leg, testing for the sharp, wrong protest of a break, and finding only the dull, ordinary complaint of battered muscle. Snow is packed gently along the worst of the swelling, a crude but effective version of the ice packs waiting in your freezer back home. You have to love how your species keeps rediscovering the same basic tricks. Around you, other bodies are being audited by touch and glance. A twisted wrist is wrapped snugly in a strip of softened hide. A shallow cut along a cheek is rinsed with melted snow and smeared with animal fat mixed with whatever herbs this frozen world can spare. Fingers that spent the morning gripping spears now pick carefully at slivers of stone embedded in palms, coaxing them free. No one here expects to move through life unscathed. The unspoken goal is simply to prevent small damage from becoming permanent ruin. It is strangely comforting, this blunt, practical care. No one asks whether you deserve to rest after what happened. You're hurt, therefore you are tended. Beyond the circle of healing, the tools that carried you through the chaos are receiving their own attention. Broken spear shafts are examined, cracked sections cut away, usable lengths saved. Stone points that chipped or shattered are collected into a small pile to be reworked when hands are less tired. Cordage frayed by sudden strain is unwound and rewoven, each twist reinforcing not only the fibers, but also the quiet determination to not let one bad shift of the wind end the story. A camp like this cannot afford the luxury of throwing things away just because they failed once. They are reset, reshaped, given another chance. If only your modern inner systems receive the same patient second passes instead of being discarded when they crack under pressure. The fire at the center is fed thoughtfully, not greedily. Larger pieces of bone from older kills are laid across the coals, where they blacken, hiss, and eventually flare, releasing stored fat in small, bright bursts. The sound soft but distinct, a gentle popping, a faint hiss, the occasional sigh as a pocket of marrow gives up its last concentrated energy. The smell that rises from burning bone is different from that of wood, denser, almost sweet, tinged with the knowledge that this is fuel of a rarer sort. Over it, fresh meat begins to roast on simple frames, surface searing while the interior slowly warms. The day's terror is being transformed, molecule by molecule, into warmth, nourishment, and the promise of another morning. When the immediate flurry of triage and sorting settles, the camp's noise drops into a deeper, more reflective register. Movements slow, bodies draw closer to the heat, not because the cold has worsened, but because the memories in their muscles need distance from the empty space of the basin. Stories begin to form in the shared silence, not in quoted lines, but in gestures, a hand that unconsciously imitates the sudden lurch of a sliding mammoth, a shrug that recalls the exact moment the wind turned, a brief meeting of eyes that acknowledges how close one footfall came. This is how the experience will be digested, not just in stomachs, but in minds. Each retelling in the quiet of someone's thoughts will smooth a little of the jagged edge from the memory, turning raw fear into usable caution. You feel the crash hitting you now that the danger has passed. Your hands tremble slightly as you lift them towards the fire. Your breathing goes shallow and then deep again as your nervous system recalibrates. There is a familiar flavor to this, the way your body reacts after a near miss on the road, or a message that could have ruined everything, but didn't. Here, though, instead of pretending nothing happened and plunging straight back into tasks, you're allowed, even expected, to sit in the circle and come down slowly. Shock is not an individual failure. It is a natural tax the world collects for letting you keep living. Night gathers once more, stitching the sky back into its familiar black canopy. Stars blink awake above the camp, indifferent to the day's small drama. The fire burns steadier now, its earlier wildness replaced by a slow, confident pulse. The smell of roasting meat thickens the air, wrapping you in a tangible promise that today's chaos will put calories in everyone's veins. Around you, people lean into each other's warmth, shoulders touching through layers of hide. Tools now rest in neat little clusters, drying and waiting. Wounds are bound. Breathing slows. You stretch your legs towards the flames, feeling the heat seep gradually into bruised muscle. The hiss and pop of burning bone become a kind of lullaby, a reminder that some storms end not with applause, but with quiet repairs and the simple, stubborn decision to keep going. You let your eyes fall half closed, watching the firelight turn the inside of your lids orange and red. For the first time since the wind betrayed you on the ridge, your thoughts move slowly enough that you can see them passing by, instead of being dragged behind them. The world has not become safer, but for this moment, here in the ring of light and breath, it is safe enough. The decision to move settles over the camp not as a sudden announcement, but as a slow alignment of glances toward the horizon. The mammoths have swung their broad, deliberate path toward a distant line of hills and show no sign of turning back. The racks of smoked meat, once reassuring, now look modest rather than generous. The wind has developed a new habit of slicing straight through the camp at odd hours, as if practicing for something worse. Out here, staying put can be just as risky as going, and the people around you do not specialize in denial. They specialize in motion. Breaking camp looks chaotic for the first few minutes, the way any move does. Then the underlying pattern reveals itself. Sleeping hides are rolled tightly and lashed with cords, transformed from nighttime nests into daytime bundles. Tools are sorted into what must stay close at hand and what can travel deeper in the loads. Bones set aside for fuel are gathered into sacks and frames. The memory of burning marrow, that soft hiss and pop you have come to recognize, is too valuable to abandon. The fire is not extinguished so much as carefully divided. A cluster of hot coals is wrapped in insulating ash and tucked into a thick-walled container of hollowed bone and hide. The camp's heart is about to beat in someone's arms instead of in the ground. You help where you can, though your modern instincts keep reaching for cardboard boxes and color-coded labels that do not exist. Here, the packing system is written in muscles and experience. Heavier loads go to those whose joints still cooperate. Older shoulders take lighter bundles, but carry just as much responsibility, walking where they can keep an eye on everyone. Children tote surprisingly important things: coils of cord, small tools, a carefully crafted toy bird that looks frivolous until you realize it will be the difference between giggles and tears when the nights feel too long. Every object that makes the cut has to carry its weight in calories, comfort, or continuity. There is no room for clutter. You try not to think about the drawer of random cables back home that could never survive in this economy. When the camp finally unthreads itself from the frozen ground, the plane feels different. The ring of hides and tools and smoke that defines safety has been absorbed into moving bodies. The landscape, previously divided into inside and outside, now becomes one long outside. At the front, a pair of experienced pathfinders set the route, their eyes on the snow, the wind, and the shape of the land. Behind them, a loose column forms along the line of a frozen river. The surface is mostly buried, but the subtle change in the land's curve reveals its presence. Riverbeds, even in this deep freeze, are still the easiest ways to cut through stubborn terrain. They are also excellent places to fall through if you misjudge their strength, which adds a little spice to the day. The ice sings under your combined weight in low, uneasy notes, nothing like the sharp, thin crack of imminent disaster, more like an old floorboard complaining. The Pathfinders read those sounds the way you once read progress bars. They keep to the places where snow lies in certain patterns, where the edges of the banks show a smooth, uninterrupted line. When they do step off the river and onto higher ground, the reason is usually obvious a few moments later. A stretch of treacherous, glassy ice, or a patch of snow slumped oddly into a depression that hints at water moving below. You follow their tracks, boots landing where they landed, understanding that in this world, plagiarism is survival strategy, not moral failing. Hours stretch. The landscape repeats itself with minor variations. Hummocked snow, leafless shrubs, the occasional ghostly stand of thin, frost-brittle trees clinging to the edges of gullies. Your breath settles into a simple pattern you can feel even through your heavy clothes. In, out. Cloud, vanish. In, out. Cloud, vanish. Worries that once lived in the front of your mind now seem like distant noise from another room. The immediate concerns: do not twist an ankle, do not fall behind, do not step where the ice resents you, leave little space for overthinking. It's not a bad trade. Now and then, the world offers reminders that other lives thread through this cold tapestry. A line of reindeer tracks crosses your path, each neat hoofprint a punctuation mark in the snow. Far off on a ridge, a shadow pauses, long and low, watching, then melts away when the wind shifts. Whatever predator owns that silhouette is smart enough to know that a moving camp is more trouble than it is worth. You feel its attention slide off the group like water. Out here, danger usually chooses the easiest option. Today, thanks to numbers, you are not it. By the time the light tilts downward, painting the snow with the faint peach and lavender tones of a grudging sun, the land has been slowly reshaping itself under your feet. Low hills gather into steeper rises. The wind, once a broad, open-handed presence, wedges itself between slopes and picks up speed in the narrowed space. Faces tuck deeper into hoods. Load-bearers adjust their grips so blunt, icy gusts can't yank bundles free. The frozen river that has been your guide dives into a shallow canyon, its banks rising into walls that break the wind at last. The sudden relative quiet feels almost decadent. You follow the river into this carved passage until its walls open out on one side into a wide, sheltered bowl. Here, the ground dips just enough to offer protection, but not so much that cold air pools heavily at the bottom. A scatter of stunted trees, more shrub than forest, cling to the slopes. Their branches are bare, but their tangled roots hold the soil against erosion, and you can imagine leaves returning in some brief future summer. Signs of older use lie everywhere if you know how to see them. Stones arranged in two neat circles half buried in snow, dark stains where fires once burned, a scrap of hide frozen into the ground. Others, like your band, have passed this way before, paused here, survived here. That knowledge settles around your shoulders more warmly than any cloak. The camp unfurls again with an ease that borders on grace. Loads drop in agreed spots. Hides blossom back into shelter. The coals carried so carefully all day are poured into a prepared hollow, teased alive with dry grass and slivers of wood until flame cups itself in the stones once more. Soon smoke climbs into the dimming air, scratching a new mark on the sky to join all the older, invisible ones. Meat is hung where the wind can dry it without stealing too much warmth. Water, chipped from the river and melted, steams in shallow containers, carrying the strange comfort of something warm you can hold between your hands. As the first stars blink awake overhead, you feel the rhythm of the band settle back into itself, this time wrapped by hills instead of open plain. Tonight the wind will mutter above your head rather than claw at your face. Snow will drift softly against the outside of hides while firelight paints the inside with wavering amber. The mammoth herd is somewhere out there still, tracing its own thread through the landscape, but for now you have followed as far as you need to. The valley holds you in its shallow, frozen palm, and for at least one more night, that's enough. Night returns, as if it has been circling patiently all day, waiting for its turn. The valley darkens from the edges inward, the last thin band of pale sky above the ridges fading into deep blue and then into black. Hides are settled, meat is checked one final time, tools are laid aside where hands can find them, even in low light. The day's work narrows down to one remaining task, keeping the small core of fire alive against the vast, indifferent cold pressing in from all directions. You lie on your side near the embers, close enough that your cheeks feel the heat and your back knows the chill, a soft gradient between safety and the edge of everything else. The fire is smaller now, not a roaring blaze, but a steady bed of coals with occasional tongues of flame rising like lazy thoughts. Each ember glows at its own pace, pulsing in slow breaths of orange and red. When a bit of charred wood collapses inward, sparks leap up in a sudden fountain, tiny fragments of star trying to go home. They rise, swirl, and then vanish into the dark just above your head, as if the night is swallowing them with quiet satisfaction. Above that, the sky stretches clear and sharp. This far from any city, there is no faded purple haze at the horizon, no dull halo from streetlights. Instead, the Milky Way spills across the darkness like a wide, pale river, crowded with more stars than your modern eyes ever believed were real. You can pick out a few patterns you remember from diagrams and apps, but most of the sky is simply a high tide of brightness, so dense that your brain gives up labeling any of it and just lets it exist. You understand in an instant why this band of light has so often been imagined as a path, a bridge, a road to somewhere else. It looks like a place you could walk if you were only a little lighter and a little less attached to gravity. Around the fire, bodies curl into comfortable shapes. Some sit with knees drawn up, arms wrapped around their legs, watching the flames through half-closed eyes. Others lie flat on their backs, using raw hides as pillows, their breath stacking in faint clouds that drift upward and disappear. Hands fiddle with small tasks that do not require concentration, plaiting rawhide cords tighter, smoothing the shaft of a spear with a piece of bone, turning a small carved object slowly between fingers. This is not productivity in the way you usually define it. It is more like the mind's version of stretching after a long, hard day. The work is gentle, half-focused, designed as much to soothe as to accomplish. Stories begin, not with announcements, but with small ripples of memory, a gesture, a glance, the way someone's hand mimics the sudden lurch of a mammoth's foot in deep snow. A shoulder lifts in an echo of the moment the wind betrayed the hunt, then settles, as if setting the memory down more neatly than it was lived. Imagined lines of cause and effect are rearranged into something that makes more sense than the chaos of the afternoon ever did. Fear becomes lesson. Luck becomes skill, or caution, or gratitude. In this light, around this fire, the story of what happened bends just enough to fit into the group's ongoing tale about who they are and how they keep going. You recognize the pattern because you do the same thing with your own life, only your fire is usually a lit screen and your stars are the tiny icons of other people's curated days. You replay events, Tidy your mistakes into anecdotes. Reframe the moments when you nearly broke under pressure into stories about resilience or bad timing or both. Out here, the editing is more honest. There is no point pretending that you were not scared when the snow swallowed your leg, or when a foot the size of your entire torso slammed down close enough to shake your bones. The fear is part of the story, not a flaw to be hidden. It sharpens the lesson rather than spoiling the performance. As the night deepens, the rituals become even simpler. Someone feeds the fire with a carefully chosen piece of wood or bone, never so much that it roars, always just enough to keep the core hot. A pot of melted snow, warmed to a comfortable heat, is passed hand to hand so fingers can wrap around it for a few breaths before it moves on. Hides are inched closer, gaps tucked in, the line between cold and warm redrawn a little tighter. Above, the stars glide along their patient paths. Below, embers crack softly, and every now and then a spark escapes with a cheerful snap, climbing toward the sky as if trying out for a place among the constellations. Your own modern anxieties, the ones that felt so large and sharp only a few hours before you lay down in your own bed, begin to shrink in this scale. Deadlines, unread messages, awkward conversations, money worries. They are still there, little knots in the fabric of your thoughts, but they look different when contrasted with the reality of this valley. Here the questions are blunt and immediate. Is there enough food, enough fuel, enough health in this group to survive the next stretch of winter? The people around you cannot afford the luxury of spiraling about whether they are doing life correctly. They make a plan, accept that the world will ruin some or all of it, and then they repair, adjust, and try again. You watch a thin stream of sparks climb into the night, glowing orange for a few seconds before fading into invisible ash. They could be a visual metaphor for your worries, if your brain insists on being poetic about it. Each little flare rises bright and insistent, then dissolves into the larger dark where countless other brief flares have gone before. The dark does not care, the stars do not blink. The fire does not change its rhythm. You feel something inside you mirror that indifference in a kind, gentle way, as if a deeper part of your mind is finally taking your smaller fears by the shoulders and guiding them to a seat, telling them they don't always get to drive the whole day. Morning creeps into the valley with a different kind of light. It is still pale and thin, but there is a softness to it, a hazy quality that makes the edges of rocks and shrubs look slightly blurred. You wake to the familiar stiffness in your joints, the rough feel of hide under your cheek, the quiet murmur of people already moving. When you sit up, the first thing you notice is not the fire or the sky, but the sound. Somewhere close by, under all the other noises, there was a faint, irregular dripping. At first you blame it on your imagination. Then you see it. Along the lower edge of the nearest shelter, where snow has piled against stretched hide for days, beads of water are forming, glistening like tiny glass seeds. They swell, tremble, and fall in slow succession, ticking softly into a small, darkening patch below. The snow there has lost its dry, easy crunch. It looks bruised, its clean surface turning granular and heavy. You reach out and press your gloved fingers into it. Instead of resisting like compacted powder, it yields with a slushy sigh. The cold is still strong enough to bite, but the grip is loosening. The day unfurls, and more small betrayals appear. The frozen river that guided you into this valley carries a thin skin of water over its once opaque ice. Where the surface dips, puddles have formed, shallow and deceptive, catching the light in wavering reflections. Each step onto the river must now be negotiated, not simply trusted. The pathfinders tap with spear shafts, listening for hollow notes under the surface. A few weeks ago, the ice sang in clear, confident tones, the deep voice of something that expected to last. Today, the song is uneven, interrupted by the soft, unpleasant creak of rot beginning. Animal tracks tell their own version of the story. Mammoth prints still crater the snow in wide, deep circles, but their edges are slumping, collapsing inward as warmth coaxes structure out of the frozen grains. Between them, fresher tracks, cut at unexpected angles. Reindeer hooves mark a route that skims higher along the slope than before, avoiding the newly treacherous river. A wolf or something like it has paced along the valley's lip, its paws leaving muddy impressions where the top layer of snow has turned to paste in the midday light. The neat, crisp punctuation marks you once admired across the plain are smudged now, sentences blurring as if the land itself is growing damp with revision. Even the air feels different on your skin. The cold still bites, but there is a weight to it now, a faint dampness that clings to hair and lashes. When you exhale, your breath hangs heavier, not the dry, powdery plume of deep winter, but a thicker ghost that sinks before it fades. During the warmest hour of the day, when the sun leans its thin warmth directly into the valley, a delicate fog lifts from the snow in low veils. It pools briefly along the ground, softening footprints and stones, then slips away as the light weakens. Everything is slightly less solid, as if the world is thinking about turning into something else. The people around you notice, of course. They have lived their entire lives inside the moods of this ice. Plans that once felt solid, routes that seemed reliable, now carry a new layer of doubt. When someone sets out to check traps or scout the herd, there is more careful talk with hands about where to step and when to return. The time of day when it is safe to cross the river gets shorter, squeezed between the memory of night frost and the threat of afternoon softness. Loads are adjusted. Extra care is taken when choosing where to stack wood and meat, so they will not slide or flood if the ground shifts under meltwater. Survival has always depended on reading the world's subtle hints. Now, the hints are changing their script. One afternoon, following a small party up a low ridge, you crest the top and stop short. On the far side, where a south-facing slope drinks a little more sunlight, the snow has retreated in ragged patches. Between the dirty remnants, the ground is exposed, dark earth and old gravel, slick with moisture. And in that saturated mess, impossible and stubborn, a few thin blades of green push up. They are not lush or dramatic, just fragile spikes insisting on their own existence. Against the backdrop of mammoth steps and human endurance, they look almost laughably small. Yet they are the first true color you have seen here that is not white, gray, brown, or the temporary orange of fire. Your chest does a strange little double beat, part relief, part unease. Down in the valley, talk shifts in quiet ways. The mammoth herd that has been your moving landmark swings wider in its path, chasing fresh growth on the edges of thawing ground. It becomes harder to predict where their shadows will appear on the horizon. Some of the older people, bodies wrapped in years as well as hides, stand a little longer than usual at the mouths of shelters eyes following the altered paths of birds and clouds. They have seen winters lean and winters rich, ice that seemed unable to loosen and ice that betrayed them too soon. Even without words, you can feel their concern reaching past the present season into something larger, a sense that the stable world they learned as children is quietly renegotiating its rules. At night, the stars still come, but the air between you and them has more movement. Thin clouds drift by in high sheets, softening constellations that once shouted in sharp, icy points. The fire hisses a little more as melting snow drips into hidden coals. Steam curls up from drying hides where strayed droplets landed earlier. Even the familiar hiss and pop of burning bone sounds different, the fat within it thawing faster before it flares. The sounds of the camp, scraping, breathing, crackling, now are threaded with tiny constant notes of water going where solid once ruled. You can't help thinking of your own century as you watch this happening in another one. In your world, the talk of melting ice and migrating animals usually arrives through headlines and statistics, numbers lined up in rows, graphs climbing in guilty slopes. Here, there are no charts, only the feel of a boot sinking deeper than it did yesterday, the sudden, unwelcome chill of water leaking into a crack in the soul. The message lands in bodies instead of inboxes. The conclusion is the same. A world you thought was fixed is shifting under your feet, and you don't get to opt out. You only get to decide how to respond. In the valley, the response is practical, as always. Routes are redrawn along higher ground. Children are warned by gesture and demonstration away from the now tricky edges of the river. Meat is smoked harder in case the next move must be sooner and longer than expected. Watches at night linger a bit more on the sound of distant cracking ice and less on the stories of old hunts. The camp remains warm, bright, and human, but there is a new tension woven quietly into its rhythm, a low chord under the familiar melody. You lie down again near the fire, listening to the soft, persistent dripping at the edge of the shelter, like a slow, clear clock marking a change that cannot be reversed. Above you, the stars navigate their ancient paths, indifferent and reliable. Below you, water carves tiny channels in snow, experimenting with new ways to move. Between those two immensities, you breathe in and out, a small, warm creature in a world that is gently, inexorably rearranging itself. Days begin to slide into one another, not because life grows empty, but because it settles into a deep, repeating rhythm. You wake, work, walk, eat, sleep. You watch the sky, the herd, the moods of snow and water. Small changes keep collecting at the edges of this loop. Snow along the valley walls slumps a little lower. The river's surface, once a white, silent bar, now carries thin sheets of water that wink and vanish. Your body quietly adds this new instability to its list of things to navigate. As long as the fire still burns and the mammoths still walk, you tell yourself, the world is mostly intact. Even so, the signs of departure stack up. The herd spends more time near the valley's mouth and less in the wide bowl you once watched them cross like a living tide. Their trails fork and wander, drawn toward patches of new growth on exposed slopes. Calves that seemed fragile when you first saw them now move with casual confidence, their trunks exploring the air as if this thaw is simply what life does. Each time you glimpse the animals, a little farther away, a little more hidden by mist or uneven ground, something tugs under your sternum. It feels like watching close friends begin replying more slowly, their lives quietly turning toward distances you cannot follow. In camp, work carries the same quiet tone. Hides are checked not just for cold, but for the damp that creeps into every seam during the day's brief softness. Tools are subtly reshaped for cutting meat that is less frozen and more slick. Pathfinders plan routes that rely less on the river and more on higher, rockier ground. The calm competence you've learned to trust is unchanged, but threaded through it is a new wariness, the sense that everyone is walking along the last firm stretch of something that will not last much longer. At night, the sky still opens, but thin veils of cloud slide more often between you and the stars, softening patterns that once shouted in sharp points. By contrast, the fire feels closer than ever. You find yourself drifting toward it, as if some quiet part of you suspects this time is borrowed. The smell of smoke and drying hides, once almost overwhelming, has become pure comfort. Your hair and clothes carry it now, layers of scent laid over your original sentry. Imagining yourself back in your own bed, you cannot picture how this will ever truly wash away. You start to notice how the light behaves at the camp's edge. It does not end in a clean line the way an electric bulb's below does. It thins gradually, strands of brightness stretching into the dark before dissolving. In that thinning zone, objects and people look softer, outlines blurred, movement slowed. You realize you have been drifting closer to that edge without quite meaning to. Your thoughts slide more often to your pillow, to the cool patch of sheet your toes always seek, to the low domestic hum of your usual nights. At the same time, your senses cling stubbornly to the present, the hiss of burning bone, the rustle of hides, the long-shared sigh of the band settling around the coals. When you close your eyes, the two worlds balance on either side of your awareness like twin plates on a scale. On one side, this valley, this fire, those heavy, steady footsteps on snow. On the other, the familiar weight of your blankets and the distant wash of traffic behind your walls. For a while, the balance holds. Then, as the days of thaw add themselves quietly to your inner ledger, you feel the tilt begin, small, steady, almost polite, back toward home. It is not a rejection of this place. It is simply the natural exhale after a long, deep inhale. Out on the horizon, the mammoths become less like neighbors and more like a migrating rumor. You see them as smudges moving through distant haze or as a faint dark seam against the sky. More often you feel them in the low tremor underfoot than in clear sight. Their path is carrying them somewhere you are not meant to go, at least not in the way you are traveling now. Their massive bodies, once close enough for you to feel their hearts through your boots, begin to fold back into possibility instead of presence, legend instead of local weather. In their place, other details step forward. Green spikes on the south-facing slope expand into stubborn mats of color. New birds arrive, their calls thin but insistent against the fading quiet of full winter. The air carries more than smoke and clean cold now. Damp soil, decaying leaves waking under the thaw, the faint metallic tang of water running freer every day. The world is not emptying, only rearranging its cast. But for you, that rearrangement feels like a curtain lowering slowly on this particular scene. You feel the change most clearly at the edges of perception. The line where rock meets snow seems to shimmer if you stare too long, as if the whole valley is seen through a sheet of warming air. Your own hands, when you lift them between you and the fire, are solid at the center, but their outlines fuzz into stray light that does not entirely belong to flesh. The crunch of your footsteps on snow takes on a slight, hollow echo, as though the ground is already beginning to forget how to answer you. The fire keeps its steady, glowing heart, but even its warmth feels different on your skin. Beneath the heat is another sensation, as if the air itself were loosening an invisible tether tying you here. Each spark that jumps into the dark seems to tug at something inside your chest, tiny playful pulls encouraging you upward, outward, away. The same ancient forces that once drew you to this circle, cold, hunger, curiosity, the need to understand how your species has carried itself through so many winters, now begin, gently, to let you go. You do not stand to leave, you simply breathe. Your eyelids sink lower as the sounds of the camp fold together, the rustle of hides, the soft drip of meltwater, the slow exhale of someone already half asleep. Beyond them, further out, the remembered rhythm of mammoth footsteps continues, not in the snow now, but inside you, padding along the quiet corridors of your bones. Time, which is felt wide and slow here, begins to gather itself, drawing in its edges like a tide preparing to retreat. Firelight smears into a gentle blur. The valley, the camp, the receding herd all remain, but their hold on you slackens, as if the world itself is taking one last long breath and on the exhale is ready to lift you gently back across the ages. The valley loosens its hold on you so gently that, for a moment, you think you are just sinking deeper into sleep. Firelight blurs to a soft smear of orange behind your closed eyes. The hiss of burning bone stretches into a long, even sigh, and the slow, padded rhythm of mammoth feet rolls through your chest like a distant drum. You do not stand. You do not say goodbye. You simply feel the scene begin to thin around you, as if someone were quietly opening all the invisible laces that tied you to this Ice Age night. The ground beneath your body changes first. Frozen earth, faintly bumpy under hides, melts into something softer and strangely familiar. The firm edge of a rolled skin becomes the yielding curve of a mattress. The smell of wood smoke and animal fat, layered into your hair and clothes, drifts outward and fades, replaced by the faint detergent note of your sheets and whatever small specific scent your room always carries. Dust on books, maybe, or the ghost of yesterday's coffee. The vast bowl of black sky crowded with stars contracts, folding itself neatly into the dark above your bed, where only a few city-lit shadows move across the ceiling. You wake without meaning to, your eyes open to the dim contours you know by heart, the outline of furniture, the pale rectangle of a window, the quiet glow of a standby light or a charging cable. For a second, your brain stutters, running an error check. No snow, no hides, no mammoths. Just your room exactly as you left it, smugly unchanged. Your heart, however, takes a moment longer to come home. It still beats in that slow, heavy rhythm, as if it remembers walking across winter plains in someone else's boots. You lie there, listening. Outside, instead of wind sliding over frozen ridges, is the low rush of traffic or the occasional bark of a dog. The tiny creaks you once blamed for ghosts announce themselves now as expansions of walls, the sigh of pipes, the shuffle of neighbors. Yet threaded through these familiar sounds is something subtler. The echo of large bodies moving in the distance, not literally, but as a memory lodged somewhere behind your ribs. Every time your lungs fill, you can almost taste cold air so clear it burned a little going in. Every time you exhale, you half expect to see your breath gather above you in a small silver cloud before disappearing into the dark. You notice your own warmth more acutely now. The layers of fabric over you feel suddenly luxurious, not in price, but in precision. Each blanket, each corner of sheet, exactly where you left it, holding your body's heat like a promise. No one had to carry fire across a frozen river to keep this bed warm. No one had to gamble their life against the weight of a terrified mammoth so that you could roll over at 3 in the morning and tug the covers higher. Survival for you usually means replying to emails, paying bills, pretending not to be exhausted. But somewhere inside, the version of you who sat by an ice age fire now knows what it costs to keep breath moving in a world that does not care either way. You bring your hand to your chest and feel your heartbeat under your palm. It is small, quick, human, nothing like the deep, seismic thud that shook the snow under mammoth feet. And yet, in its own way, it is just as stubborn. It has carried you through long days that were their own kind of winter, the months where everything felt frozen, the weeks when one wrong gust of circumstance knocked your plans sideways, the nights when your mind stampeded in circles, trampling all the quiet you were trying to grow. You have never hunted across a tundra, but you have still had to choose over and over to keep moving forward through landscapes that did not promise anything. The images from the journey flicker behind your eyes when you close them again. The ring of stones around the fire, the slow rise of breath from mammoth trunks, the sharp, clean sound of stone flaking under practiced hands. The moment the wind turned and the plan split apart along jagged lines you did not draw, the hands hauling you out of a hole in the snow without stopping to ask whether you had done enough to deserve it. These are not just scenes from a historical documentary in your head. They are reminders that your fragility has always coexisted with other people's strength, that your survival has never been purely yours. It is strangely comforting. You are fragile, yes, obviously. One illness, one accident, one badly timed storm of circumstances can knock you flat. The mammoths knew that vulnerability in their bones. The hunters knew it in every careful step. But you are also carried by the unseen labor that keeps heat in your walls and food in your kitchen, carried by the small kindnesses of people who shift closer so you can share the figurative fire, carried sometimes by your own stubbornness when nothing else seems available. You are small, but you are not alone, and you come from a very long line of creatures that were scared and tired and kept going anyway. You inhale slowly, imagining that somewhere, in a layer of time that still exists just out of sight, mammoths are walking across a frozen plain. Their breath steams into the air. Their feet drum a path through snow that will eventually melt and feed new grass. Around a distant fire, people you will never meet lean into each other's warmth, repair their tools, and quietly refuse to give up. You are not them, and they are not you, but the thread between you is real. It runs through bone and breath and the shared, ridiculous determination to be alive for one more morning. Lying there in your own dark room, You let that awareness settle in your chest like a small glowing coal, a leftover ember from a very old fire. You do not have to do anything dramatic with it. You just have to carry it with you into tomorrow, letting it remind you, on the days when you feel small and breakable, that being small and breakable has never stopped your species from crossing impossible distances. You are one more warm body in a long story of warm bodies, and for tonight, that is more than enough. The first hint of sleep comes back to you, softer now, not as an escape, but as a kind of consent. Your muscles loosen into the mattress. Your jaw unhooks from the day. Outside, your world keeps turning in its usual messy way. Inside, the echoes of ice, fire, and heavy footsteps fade to a quiet background hum, like a distant train you can barely hear. You breathe once more, deeply, and let the ember in your chest glow calmly in the dark, a tiny ice age star carried forward into your everyday, ordinary, miraculous life. You do not need to grab your phone. You do not need to replay the whole day or audit every decision you made. There is nothing in this exact moment that cannot wait on the far side of rest. So instead, you let the pictures soften further, the mammoths shrinking to gentle shapes against pale horizons, the campfire settling into harmless ash, and the hunters' silhouettes dissolving into the broader dark of a world that has already moved on. Their work tonight is finished. Yours, for this second, is simply to be. You notice how good it feels to be cradled by something soft, to have a pillow under your head instead of rolled hide and frozen ground. You feel the sheet on your skin, the familiar dip in the mattress where your body always chooses the same spot. These are your modern versions of shelter and warmth, as valid as any Ice Age fire, even if they come with too many notifications and not enough stars. You earned them in your own ways, through effort, worry, showing up on days you did not want to. It is okay to let them do their job now and hold you up for a while. If stray, anxious thoughts try one last time to pitch a tent in the middle of your mind, you can give them something else to do. Let them count mammoths instead of problems. Each heavy footfall a slow, steady beat that rocks them gently out of focus. Imagine the great animals walking past at the edge of your awareness, calm and sure, heading toward some far pasture you do not need to reach tonight. Their rhythm is patient enough to outlast whatever noise your brain is making. All you have to do is match your breathing to that slow, deliberate pace and let the rest slide by. The room around you grows quieter in your perception, even if the outside world keeps humming. Streetlights, appliances, distant engines, all of them fade to a soft gray wash at the edge of your senses. What remains close is small and kind. The warm pocket of air under your blanket, the subtle weight of the covers, the steady rise and fall of your chest. The ember in your ribs, that sense of ancient fire, cools from bright orange to a comfortable, gentle glow. It is no longer a call to adventure or a test of courage. It is simply a reminder that you are still here, and that still here is, in itself, a quiet miracle. As your thoughts stretch out and lose their sharp corners, you let the last solid images dissolve. Mammoths become shapes. Shapes become shadows. Shadows become nothing but softness. Even the idea of Ice Age winters and human courage drifts outward, like smoke thinning into the air above a dying fire. What stays close is warmth, breath, and a faint, weightless feeling of being carried safely in something larger than your worries, whether you call that history, memory, or just the gentle machinery of sleep turning on. Somewhere between waking and dreaming, you hover for a few seconds, perfectly balanced. Then you tip, easily, into whatever story your mind chooses next, knowing you do not have to steer it. The night can handle that for you. Your only task is to rest, deeply and without apology, like a traveler who has finally found a safe circle of light after a long walk through the cold. End of story. Sweet dreams.